Late afternoon gold blurred into the Atlantic horizon, warm and beautiful, yet somehow suffocating. Kingsport's richest families drifted across the Vanderbilt estate like shimmering ornaments, their laughter gliding over the cut-to-perfect lawn. Champagne sparkled, silver trays glowed. Everything looked pristine until one sound broke the illusion. A crash, a gasp, a whimper. Mia, the smallest, quietest maid on the property, had stumbled on an uneven patio stone. A single glass of red wine arced through the air and exploded across Eleanor Vanderbilt's designer silk dress, staining it like a fresh wound. The world froze. Then the slap came, sharp, brutal, echoing like a gunshot across the manicured garden. "You stupid girl," Eleanor shrieked. "This dress costs more than your life." Mia fell. Guests stared. No one moved. But someone else heard her cry. From the far side of the estate, a 4-month-old German shepherd puppy burst through a loose servant door latch, ears too big, paws too clumsy, heart too brave. Scout skidded across the lawn, planting his trembling body between Mia and the raging woman, barking with every ounce of innocence he had left. Harrison Vanderbilt stepped in, face twisted with cruelty. "Get this vermin off my property." He drew his leg back and kicked the tiny puppy so hard he sailed into a thorny rosebush. He raised his foot for a second strike, and that was when a shadow moved. Not fast, faster. One heartbeat he wasn't there. The next, a Navy SEAL stood between wealth and innocence, ready to rewrite the balance of power. The coastal town of Kingsport lived in two realities. Down by the docks, life smelled of sea salt, diesel, and honest exhaustion. But up on the cliffs of High Bluff, the air changed, perfumed, curated, manicured like a photograph no one could afford to touch. And at the center of that floating dream sat the Vanderbilt estate, a palace of polished marble, trimmed hedges and lawns shaved to the same length soldiers wore their hair. It was beautiful, yes, but beautiful in the way a cage was, perfect, sterile, and merciless. On the terrace, Elijah Thorne stood with his back against a marble pillar, watching the scene with the wary calm of someone who had seen too much to believe in glitter. 32 years old, shoulders carved from discipline, posture naturally alert. He wore a dark dress shirt that strained slightly at the seams. He didn't fit in here. Not really. Soldiers rarely fit into soft places. Beside him, Colonel James Miller, late 60s, spine straight as a rifle barrel, sipped an amber drink slowly, ice clinking like distant shells on a shoreline. His steel wool hair stirred in the warm breeze. "I appreciate you coming, son," Miller muttered. "I know this isn't your natural habitat. You look like a wolf trying to blend in with peacocks." Elijah scanned the crowd again. Habit, not anxiety. Mapping exits, reading faces, noticing small tensions the way other men noticed music. "I've got 7 days of leave left, Colonel," he replied. "Eating tiny sandwiches isn't the worst way to spend a Tuesday. Besides, Dad would have haunted me if I let you drive out alone." Miller chuckled, dry, low, tired. "He would have hated this party more than you do." Across the lawn, Harrison Vanderbilt, soft around the middle, face polished by money rather than character, held court with a circle of admirers. Diamonds glittered on his wife Eleanor's neck, her gestures sharp enough to cut air. Their laughter carried, a little too loud, a little too cruel. "They want my endorsement on a new defense logistics company," Miller murmured. "Think a few medals and free wine can buy my signature." Elijah didn't answer, but his jaw shifted a fraction, enough for the colonel to understand exactly what he thought of men who tried to purchase honor. Around them, the party sparkled in golden light, but something cold ran underneath, like a river of glass. The kind of feeling Elijah only got in hostile territories, right before something broke. And somewhere behind the gardens, a small German shepherd pup waited in a cramped servant's room, unaware that his loyalty would soon ignite a war no one in Kingsport was ready for. While the wealthy guests drifted across the Vanderbilt lawn like drifting perfume, another world existed just beyond the marble terrace, smaller, dimmer, quieter. Mia Alvarez, 22, moved through that world with the soft-footed precision of someone who had learned to survive by being invisible. Her uniform was one size too big, sleeves rolled twice, collar slightly frayed from constant washing. Her hands, small, calloused, cracked from detergents, balanced a silver tray heavy with crystal flutes. Each step was measured, cautious, almost a whispered apology to the polished floor beneath her. "Keep moving, Mia," she murmured to herself. "2 more hours, then you can go see him." Her heart wasn't here among diamonds and shallow chatter. Her heart was tucked away behind the east garage, inside a cramped servant's quarters that smelled of dust, bleach, and old carpet. That was where Scout was waiting. The thought of him softened her shoulders for a moment. Scout, her clumsy, oversized-eared German shepherd puppy. Only 4 months old, but with eyes too wise for his age. Eyes that looked at her as if she were the entire world. 2 weeks earlier, she'd found him beside a roadside fruit stand, alone, trembling, ribs visible beneath patchy fur. The seller said he was too much trouble and offered him for a few crumpled bills. Mia hadn't hesitated. She'd spent nearly everything she had saved, leaving herself with just enough for gas and sandwiches for the week. But she walked away carrying the tiny pup pressed to her chest like he was a newborn. Scout had changed everything. He greeted her every night with the frantic wag of a tail too big for his body, the way he curled beside her when the nightmares came, the ones filled with screeching brakes and twisted metal from the accident that stole her parents, was the only thing that kept her from splintering completely. She couldn't register him yet, couldn't afford the paperwork, couldn't let the Vanderbilts know. Because Eleanor Vanderbilt had made one thing brutally clear on Mia's first day. This estate does not tolerate stray animals. They carry fleas and problems. So Scout lived in secret, fed with smuggled scraps, bathed quietly at night, trained in whispered commands. And every shift Mia worked was measured in how long until she could return to him. As the late-day heat pressed against her spine, sweat trickled beneath her uniform. Her legs burned from climbing stairs, her throat dry from calling, "Yes, ma'am," and "Right away, sir," to people who never looked at her face long enough to know her name. But Scout made the hours bearable. A flicker of movement stopped her breath, one of the security cameras sweeping past the service corridor. She instinctively pulled the tray closer, straightened her back, forced her expression into the blank, obedient calm the staff mastered or lost their jobs trying. Just a few more hours. Then she'd kneel on the thin carpet of her small room, whisper, "Hey baby, I missed you," and feel Scout press his warm, trusting weight against her chest. A weight that anchored her, a weight she didn't know she was about to lose, or fight an entire dynasty to protect. The sun dipped lower, turning the Vanderbilt estate into a mosaic of shimmering gold and long shadows. Music floated across the garden, violins, soft chatter, the clink of champagne flutes. But beneath all that gentle noise ran something sharper, something that made the air feel tight, like a string pulled too far. Mia felt it before she understood it. "Girl, you! Yes, you!" Eleanor Vanderbilt's voice sliced through the humid air like a blade. Even before Mia turned, her shoulders locked in reflex. Eleanor stood near the patio, framed by expensive silk and glittering diamonds that caught the sunlight like shards of ice. Her expression was already a storm. "Are you deaf?" she snapped, tapping an empty crystal flute with a manicured fingernail. "I asked for champagne 5 minutes ago. Is moving your legs really that complicated?" Mia swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. I'll bring it right away." The guests around Eleanor pretended not to hear. They lifted their glasses, looked away, stepped aside, anything to avoid being the next target of her wrath. Their silence was cowardice dressed in couture. Mia hurried toward the service bar, tray pressed to her chest, but her steps faltered. Her breath came shallow. She could feel her fingers trembling even as she forced them to stay steady. Somewhere, separated by walls, doors, and the cruel indifference of wealth, Scout felt it too. Inside the cramped servants' quarters behind the garage, the puppy lifted his head. His ears pricked. His tail stopped mid-wag. His small chest expanded in a slow, uneasy breath. Her scent had changed. Her heartbeat, slow, then too fast. Fear. Scout whimpered softly. Nose pressed to the crack beneath the door, as if he could crawl through it by will alone. Back outside, Mia forced herself to keep moving. She knew the rules here. Be small, be quiet, be invisible. That was how you survived. But even so, dread nipped at her heels, whispering warnings with every step she took toward Eleanor again. Just a few yards away on the terrace, Elijah Thorne watched with quiet interest, noting the subtle flinch of the staff, the sharpness of Eleanor's tone, the hollow admiration plastered on the guests' faces. He saw things most men missed. Years of deployment had trained him to read the micro-tensions in people like maps. He didn't know Mia, but he knew fear, and he recognized the shape of it in her hunched shoulders. The party glittered on, but the cracks were widening. Mia returned with a fresh glass of champagne, moving quickly but carefully, too carefully. She stepped onto the patio, her foot landing on a stone tile just slightly out of alignment, a flaw invisible to wealthy eyes but painfully familiar to someone used to walking on eggshells. Her ankle wobbled, the tray tilted, and Eleanor Vanderbilt's sharp inhale sliced the air, an omen of the storm waiting to break. Inside the servants' room, Scout pressed harder against the door, nails scraping softly. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew she needed him, and soon he would break every barrier to reach her. The world did not fall apart in an explosion. It began with something small, almost nothing at all. A wobble, a tilt, a single breath caught in the throat. Mia stepped onto the patio, and the uneven paving stone betrayed her. Her foot slid half an inch, just enough for the weight of the tray to shift. 8 crystal flutes trembled. One broke free. The red wine inside glimmered in the sun like molten garnet as the glass spun, end over end, descending in devastating slow motion. Time stretched. Guests turned their heads. Eleanor's eyes widened. Even the breeze seemed to pause. The glass shattered against the hem of Eleanor Vanderbilt's pristine white gown, silk flown in from Milan, whispered about earlier as the centerpiece of her wardrobe. Red stained the fabric instantly, blooming outward like a violent wound. Silence hit the garden like a blackout. Then came the scream, "You idiot!" The voice didn't just cut the air, it ripped it apart. Eleanor's face contorted, turning a terrifying shade of crimson. Her hand shot out, pointing at Mia as if the young woman were something she could erase with a gesture. "This dress costs more than your entire life!" Eleanor shrieked. "Do you have any idea, what you've done?" I'm so sorry, ma'am," Mia whispered, dropping to her knees, desperately blotting the stain with napkins that only made the red spread wider. My foot, there was a—" The slap cracked through the stillness like a sniper shot. It echoed across the stone, across the garden, across the shocked faces of guests frozen in place. Mia fell backward, one hand clutching her cheek, eyes trembling with humiliation and pain. Tears fell instantly, but she swallowed her sobs as if even crying was a privilege she did not deserve. "Get up," Eleanor spat. "Get out of my sight. You're fired. I should have you arrested for destroying property." "Worthless little—" But the next sound didn't come from Eleanor. It came from the far edge of the lawn, a small, sharp bark, high-pitched, panicked, determined. Scout. He had squeezed through the loose latch and sprinted across the grass, ears flat, tail low, pure instinct driving him. He skidded on the polished stone, clumsy paws scrambling for grip until he planted himself between Mia and Eleanor. His tiny body shook with fear, but he still growled, a brave, broken little sound. "Whose mongrel is this?" Harrison boomed as he stormed forward, his face twisted with irritation, like Mia and Scout were inconveniences, not living beings. "Get this vermin off my property." Mia reached out, voice trembling. Please, sir. He's mine. He's just scared. He won't—" "Yours?" Harrison sneered. "Then you can both leave." Scout didn't back down. He leaned instinctively closer to Mia's leg, defending her with the only thing he had, his fragile body. Harrison's lip curled. "I said get out." Then his polished shoe arced back, and he kicked the puppy, hard. A sickening thud followed. Scout yelped, a sound that ripped straight through the afternoon heat, across the walls of the estate, into the heart of everyone watching. He flew several feet and crashed into a rose bush, Thorne slicing his small frame. Mia screamed. Harrison adjusted his suit, stepping forward again, lifting his foot with an almost casual cruelty, to kick the puppy a second time. But this time, the foot never landed. Someone caught it, someone whose shadow suddenly blocked out the sun. Harrison Vanderbilt's foot hovered midair, polished leather gleaming under the sun, frozen at the peak of its cruel arc. Then a hand closed around his ankle, a hand that felt like steel wrapped in flesh. The movement was so fast most guests didn't register it. One moment the billionaire was towering above a helpless puppy, the next his leg was suspended, unmoving, trapped in the grip of a man who seemed carved from calm violence. Elijah Thorne stood there, silent, expression unreadable, eyes cold as deep ocean water. He didn't shout, he didn't posture, he didn't need to. The air around him seemed to thicken, temperature dropping as if the sun itself had stepped back to watch. Harrison's eyes bulged. What are you doing? Let go of me." Elijah's fingers tightened, not painfully, just enough to remind Harrison of the difference between power and authority. With a shift of his hips, precise, practiced, effortless, Elijah pivoted. A single controlled motion sent Harrison spinning off balance. The billionaire's body hit the ground face first, nose smearing across the grass. His arm wrenched behind his back in a joint lock that sat 1 degree short of agony. Harrison shrieked anyway. "My arm! You're breaking my arm!" Elijah leaned down, speaking so quietly it forced everyone nearby to strain to hear. "I'm not breaking anything," he murmured. "Not yet." The crowd stood frozen, phones half raised, champagne flutes trembling, breaths held. Even the violinist near the gazebo stopped playing mid-note. Elijah's voice was low, even, dangerous in its control. "A man who strikes a woman," he said, "is a coward." He tightened the lock a fraction. Harrison's groan burst from the ground. But a man who hurts a defenseless animal has forfeited his right to mercy. Mia knelt by the rosebush, sobbing as she reached trembling fingers toward Scout, who whimpered softly, trying to lift his head. Blood spotted his fur where thorns had pierced him. Elijah saw her, saw the smallness of her frame, the terror in her breathing, the way she tried to shield the dog with her own shaking body. Something inside him settled. The decision to intervene was no longer a choice. It was instinct. It was duty. Harrison spat grass from his mouth. "Security! Security! Are you all blind? Arrest him! He assaulted me!" No one moved. Then Colonel Miller stepped forward, setting his glass down with a quiet, final clink. "I saw everything," the older man said, his voice carrying across the silent garden like a gavel. "And what I saw was a man kicking a puppy, and a soldier stopping him." Harrison's mouth opened, then closed again. The colonel turned to Elijah, nodding once. The nod soldiers give when a line has been crossed and there is no return. "You're done here, Harrison," Miller added, "and you can forget about that contract." Elijah released the billionaire and rose, his shirt slightly torn at the sleeve, the sunlight outlining the angular planes of his shoulders. He stepped through the whispering crowd, ignoring their wide-eyed stares, knelt in the rose bushes, and gently scooped Scout into his arms. Careful, precise, tender in ways that contrasted every muscle on him. He offered Mia a hand. She hesitated, then took it. "We're leaving," Elijah said softly. "You're not staying here another minute." And with the maid shaking beside him, the injured puppy cradled against his chest, and the crowd parting like a tide, Elijah Thorne walked away from the Vanderbilt Empire, straight into a war he hadn't chosen, but would absolutely finish. The moment Elijah stepped off the Vanderbilt property, carrying Scout in his arms and guiding Mia with a steady hand, it felt as if the atmosphere itself shifted, like the estate exhaled after years of holding its breath. But the danger was far from over. The driveway stretched ahead like a polished runway for the wealthy, lined with luxury cars gleaming beneath the late afternoon sun. Every step Elijah took was measured, purposeful, echoing against the stone path with a rhythm that felt like a countdown. His truck, a weathered 1985 Ford F-250, waited at the edge of the drive. The vehicle looked like a foreign object among polished Ferraris and Bentleys, A working man's machine in the kingdom of excess. Its matte charcoal paint and scars of use reflected a life of dust, storms, and battlefields far removed from garden parties. Elijah opened the passenger door. "Mia, get in. Hold his head steady." She obeyed instantly, sliding onto the seat as gently as if she were handling a newborn. Scout whimpered when she touched his ribs, his breath short and uneven. Elijah's jaw tightened. He'd seen wounded soldiers breathe like that. He circled the truck, scanning the estate perimeter out of habit, checking angles, memorizing faces, calculating threats. A lifetime of training turned even a driveway into a tactical map. Then he climbed in, turned the key, and the engine rumbled awake, deep, guttural, powerful enough to vibrate through their bones. They pulled onto the main road. For a few minutes, there was only the hum of the engine and the broken rhythm of Scout's breathing. Mia stroked the pup's fur, whispering broken promises. "You're okay. You're okay. Please be okay." Her words trembling like loose glass. "Elijah, his breathing is getting worse," she whispered. "I know," he answered, eyes locked on the road. "We'll stabilize him." He glanced at Scout's flank. Pain response, labored breathing, the beginning signs of shock. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Harrison Vanderbilt. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Elijah didn't respond. He didn't need to, because a moment later, blue and red lights exploded behind them. Mia gasped. Are they for us?" Elijah checked the mirror. One cruiser, then another. Lights bouncing off the wet asphalt like violent reflections of a world closing in. "They're for him," Elijah said calmly. "Not for us." The cruisers accelerated. The siren wailed, sharp, rising, drowning out everything. Ahead, the road narrowed through King's Pass, a tight corridor between a cliff edge and a dense wall of pines. A second police car pulled sideways, blocking the road. Mia clutched Scout, panic flooding her voice. "They'll take him. They'll take him back to Harrison. Elijah, they'll kill him." "Look at me," Elijah said softly. "Do not get out of this truck unless I tell you. Keep your hands visible. Do exactly as I say." He braked slowly, deliberately, like a man approaching a line he refused to cross without clarity. A young deputy stepped out from behind the blocking cruiser, uniform crisp, jaw tight, eyes unsure. His hand hovered over his holster. "Driver," he shouted through the PA system, "turn off the engine. Hands where I can see them." Elijah complied with mechanical precision, one movement at a time, deliberate, clear. He rolled down the window and extended both hands. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Elijah Thorne, United States Navy," he said, voice steady but carrying an authority that cut through the siren's echo. "I am transporting an injured animal under Good Samaritan statutes. The billionaire who called you is lying." The deputy flinched at the rank. Behind Elijah, Mia whispered through tears, "Elijah, please." "Scout's getting colder." The pup whimpered, breath fading. They were running out of time. Deputy Reynolds swallowed hard. "Sir, we have a report of assault and grand larceny." "The animal belongs to the girl. The assault was me stopping a man from kicking a puppy to death." Elijah's tone remained calm, but iron threaded beneath every word. "If you delay us and this dog dies, you will be complicit in animal cruelty." A tense silence. Then the deputy's radio crackled. A familiar voice, deep, tired, authoritative. "Sheriff Brody." "Reynolds, stand down." A beat. "I just spoke to Colonel Miller." A longer beat. "Let them pass." The deputy lowered his hand from his holster, exhaling as though he had been holding his breath for years. "You're free to go, Commander," he said quietly. I didn't see the dog." Elijah nodded with a rare flicker of respect. "Good man." He put the truck back in gear. As they rolled past the blockade, leaving sirens behind and the ocean stretching lonely beside them, Mia let out a shaky breath. "Elijah, where are we going?" He stared ahead, jaw set. "To the only place Harrison can't touch you," he answered. "And the only place Scout has a chance." The truck rumbled into the deepening twilight, toward Hope's End, a sanctuary, and the battlefield yet to come. The sky cracked open long before they reached the farm. Thunder rolled across the valley like distant artillery, vibrating through the truck's chassis. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the endless stretch of pine trees. Scout whimpered weakly in Mia's lap, his breath becoming sharp, shallow gasps. Elijah, something's wrong, Mia whispered, her voice splintering. He's not responding. Elijah glanced sideways. Scout's pupils were dilated, unfocused. His tongue was pale. His breaths ragged, uneven. Shock, pain, internal trauma. All scenarios rushed through Elijah's mind like rapid-fire diagnostics. We're almost there, he murmured, pushing the truck harder. Keep him warm. Talk to him. He hears you. But the storm was faster. Fat drops of rain slammed against the windshield, then intensified into a downpour so heavy, the wipers barely carved tunnels of visibility. The truck fishtailed as they turned onto the long gravel lane toward Hope's End. Sarah Thorne appeared on the porch, framed by the glow of a single lantern. Even from a distance, her posture told Elijah she sensed trouble long before she saw them. Mia burst through the truck door, clutching Scout to her chest. He's not breathing right. Please help him, she sobbed. Sarah's eyes sharpened instantly, not with panic, but with purpose. Inside. Now. The farmhouse swallowed them in warmth. Kerosene lamps flickering, the scent of baking bread still lingering in the air. Scout was laid gently on a rug near the wood stove. His small body twitched. His breaths came in stutters. Elijah knelt beside him, hands moving with an almost surgical precision. Mia, keep talking to him. Keep him grounded. What's happening to him? Her voice cracked. Head trauma, Elijah murmured. His brain's swelling. He's seizing. As if on cue, Scout's back arched violently. Mia screamed. Elijah! I've got him! Hold space, not pressure. Don't touch his mouth. Thunder exploded overhead. The farmhouse lights flickered once, twice, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the trembling glow of a lantern remained. The lines are down, Sarah muttered. Storm must have hit the transformer. You can't drive to the city in this. The creek bridge will wash out. Elijah, what do we do? Mia cried, hands hovering helplessly over the convulsing puppy. Elijah stood in one fluid, decisive movement. I'm going to get Sam. Mia blinked through tears. Who's Sam? Sarah answered, already lighting another lamp. Dr. Samuel Higgins, combat medic in Vietnam, the best large animal vet in the valley, and the only man crazy enough to come out in this storm. He won't come, Mia whispered fearfully. Not through this. Elijah shook his head. Sam doesn't come when called. A flash of lightning lit his silhouette sharply, jaw set, eyes determined. I'm going to bring him. He grabbed the keys and vanished into the roaring dark. The truck fought the flooded dirt road like a beast in quicksand. Rain hammered the windshield. Wind ripped branches from trees, sending them skittering across the hood. Elijah leaned forward, squinting through the blur. Every instinct sharpened to a razor's edge. Scout didn't have hours, maybe not even one. When he reached the small cabin nestled deep in the woods, he didn't knock. He pounded on the door. It flew open. Thorne! Sam Higgins barked, squinting at the deluge. His beard was silvered, his bad legs stiff, his glass eye reflecting the lightning. What the hell are you doing out here? Puppy, head trauma, seizures. I need the med bag now. Sam stared for 1 second, just long enough to understand the stakes. Then he grabbed the battered leather bag from a hook and stepped into the storm without another word. By the time they reached Hope's End, the rain was a living wall. Kitchen table's too high, Sam shouted as he limped toward the barn. I'm not ruining Sarah's floors. Use the workbench. Elijah reversed the truck to the barn doors and flicked on the high beams. 2 cones of blinding white light slicing through the darkness and turning the barn into a battlefield triage unit. Scout lay trembling on a tarp-covered table. Mia stood beside him, flashlight shaking in her hand. Please, please save him. Sam snapped into action. Pupils blown, pulse thready, intracranial pressure rising. He looked at Elijah. He's crashing. Tell me what you need, Elijah said. Hold him steady. The 2 men moved in practiced synchrony, combat medic and Navy SEAL, battlefield brothers who spoke a silent language of urgency. Sam found the vein, injected the sedatives, pushed mannitol to reduce brain swelling. Scout's body convulsed once, twice, then stilled. Breathing slowed, grew deeper, even. Sam exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're not out of the woods," he muttered, "but we've found the path." Mia collapsed to her knees, hands over her mouth, tears streaming. Elijah put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The little warrior's still fighting, and outside the storm raged on, a perfect mirror of the war waiting beyond the barn's wooden walls. Morning did not bring peace. The storm had moved on, but the air over Hope's End felt strangely heavy, thick with the metallic scent of wet soil and something more ominous, the sense that the world was holding its breath. Scout woke first. He lifted his head from the blanket Sam had laid beneath him. His bandaged ribs rose and fell in shallow but controlled breaths. His ears twitched. His nose quivered. He sensed something foreign, something wrong. Mia was asleep beside him on the barn floor, exhaustion pulling her into a fragile slumber. Sarah stood at the doorway, arms folded, watching the horizon with the wary stillness of someone who had survived many storms. Some weather, some human. Elijah finished tightening a new plank on the fence line. Every muscle in his body hummed with fatigue, but peace, true peace, felt a lifetime away. When Scout struggled to his feet for the first time since the injury, Mia gasped awake. Scout, you're standing," she cried softly. The puppy wobbled, legs trembling like reeds in wind, but his tail lifted. He pressed his head into her chest, and for a brief moment, hope warmed the chilled barn. But Elijah saw what Mia didn't. Scout wasn't just standing. He was staring past her, eyes fixed, ears forward. Bodies of working dogs only move like that when something unseen steps onto their land. Elijah turned. The dust cloud rising on the road wasn't from a tractor. It was from a car, a sleek black sedan gliding up the gravel driveway like a hearse arriving early. Mia's throat tightened. Who is that?" "Trouble," Sarah muttered. The car stopped inches from the porch. The back door opened with mechanical precision, and a man stepped out, a tall, narrow figure wrapped in an expensive charcoal suit. Hair slicked back so hard it seemed to stretch his skin. He didn't belong on a farm. He belonged in a courtroom, or a corporate boardroom, or a snake pit. Marcus Sterling, lead attorney for Vanderbilt Enterprises. Elijah recognized the type instantly. Men who didn't need fists. They killed people with contracts. Sterling walked up the steps as if the farmhouse owed him respect. Scout growled, lip curling despite the bandages. The lawyer didn't even glance at him. "Mrs. Thorne," he greeted with a thin, poisonous smile. "My apologies for the intrusion." "You're not welcome here," Sarah said flatly. Sterling didn't blink. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick packet of legal documents. "I am here," he said, turning deliberately toward Mia, "to serve a formal summons." He placed the papers in her shaking hands. Mia stared, uncomprehending. "See, sir." "What is this?" "Charges," Sterling said smoothly. "Filed by Mr. Harrison Vanderbilt." Sarah stepped forward, fury rippling beneath her calm. "What charges?" "Grand larceny," Sterling replied. "Specifically the theft of a purebred German shepherd valued at $5,000. "That puppy is hers," Elijah snapped, stepping closer, shoulders squared. Sterling continued as if uninterrupted. "And the theft of a diamond ring valued at $50,000, missing from the mansion's master bedroom on the day of her dismissal." Mia's breath collapsed in her chest. I didn't touch a ring. I didn't take anything." "That," Sterling said coldly, "is a matter for a jury to decide." Scout barked, sharp, accusing, protective. Sterling ignored him. He turned to Sarah with an expression of false sympathy. "However, Mr. Vanderbilt is a reasonable man. If you agree within 24 hours to sign over the creek rights and lower pasture for his golf course expansion, he is willing to drop all charges against your guest." A hush fell so profound even the cicadas seemed to stop. Sterling had done more than deliver a threat. He had placed a noose on Mia's neck and the rope in Sarah's hands. "You've got a lot of nerve," Elijah said quietly, stepping forward. Sterling smirked. And you, Lieutenant Commander Thorne, should be careful. Interfering with a criminal investigation is a serious federal offense. Even for men in uniform. He slipped a business card onto the porch railing. 24 hours. After that, the sheriff comes with an arrest warrant. He walked back to the black sedan without fear, without hurry, without a conscience. When the engine roared away, the silence he left behind felt colder than the storm. Mia dropped the papers, hands covering her face. This is all my fault. I should leave. Stop, Sarah said sharply, gripping her shoulders. We don't trade people for land. Not in this family. Elijah was quiet, too quiet, until his phone vibrated. He looked down. U.S. Navy Command, report for deployment, 48 hours. His face hardened. Mia's eyes widened. Elijah! No, no, please. He closed the phone slowly. The enemy had finally revealed his full shape. Legal, strategic, merciless. And Elijah had only 2 days left to save Mia, save Scout, and protect the land his family had bled for. Hope's End had become a battlefield, and the real war was just beginning. The silence after Sterling left was suffocating, thick as smoke, heavy as grief. Mia knelt in the dirt, shaking, clutching Scout as though the tiny pup could shield her from a world that had turned predatory overnight. Sarah stood frozen, jaw set but eyes burning with the helpless fury of a mother watching wolves circle her home. Elijah didn't speak. He simply took the papers lying in the dust, read them once, then folded them with mechanical precision. That stillness was more frightening than rage. Elijah, Mia whispered, voice trembling. What? What are we going to do? Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked into the house, up the stairs into his old room. Mia followed him with her eyes, terrified of what silence meant from a man like him. Upstairs, Elijah opened the closet. The garment bag hanging inside was untouched, preserved behind plastic like a relic. He unzipped it. The dress blue uniform, midnight navy fabric, brass buttons polished to a gleam, gold and red ribbons lined in perfect rows, waiting like an old oath. He didn't wear it often. You didn't wear something like that unless you were invoking something bigger than yourself. A promise, a duty, a creed. He fastened each button slowly, the metallic click echoing through the quiet room. He straightened the ribbons, then pinned the trident above his heart, the golden emblem of the seals catching the morning light. He looked into the mirror, not at his reflection, at the man he needed to become again, a man who didn't beg for justice, a man who demanded it. When he came downstairs, Sarah's hand covered her mouth. Mia gasped. Scout even whimpered softly, sensing the shift. Elijah, Mia whispered. You look like... He didn't let her finish. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. I'm going to fix this. How? Her voice cracked. Elijah, Sarah said gently. Don't start a war you can't win. He met her eyes. Mom. This war started the moment that man laid a hand on that dog. Then he walked out the door. The Kingsport Sheriff's Office sat under the weight of a morning sun that seemed harsher than usual. White, glaring, unkind. Elijah's truck rumbled into the lot, scattering pigeons as it parked. When he stepped out in full-dress uniform, people on the sidewalk stopped mid-step. A soldier in blues is not something you ignore. A SEAL in blues is something you clear a path for. He walked through the front entrance, each footstep heavy, purposeful, the medals on his chest chiming a low warning with every subtle movement. Deputy Reynolds looked up from the desk and immediately straightened. Commander Thorne? Sheriff, Elijah said, not breaking stride. Brody was in the back office. And the door opened the moment Elijah reached it. The sheriff looked older, more tired. His badge seemed heavier today. Elijah, Brody sighed, rubbing his temples. I knew you'd come. We need to talk, Elijah said. Brody gestured for him to step inside, then closed the door behind them. The air was thick with tension. Two men who understood duty, justice, and the fine line between the two. Elijah, Brody began slowly, you know I respect you. You know this. But Vanderbilt has filed charges, and he has evidence. The DA, he's lying, Elijah cut in, about everything. Can you prove it? Brody asked. Not yet. Then my hands are tied. The warrant is coming. Elijah stepped closer, placing both palms on the sheriff's desk. His voice dropped, low, controlled, and impossibly calm. Your hands are tied by paperwork, Jim. My hands are tied by an oath. Brody looked away. I deploy in 48 hours, Elijah said, jaw tightening. I will be halfway across the world fighting for people like Vanderbilt to sleep at night. But before I go, I will find proof. I just need time. Elijah, give me 48 hours, he demanded. Do not serve that warrant. Not until I come back. Brody hesitated, long, painful seconds ticking by. Finally, he let out a slow breath. 48 hours, Brody said quietly. But if you don't bring me something, I'll have to take her in myself. Elijah straightened, squared his shoulders. You'll get it, he promised. Where are you going first? Brody asked. Elijah paused at the door. Hunting, he said. Men like Vanderbilt always hide their crimes behind someone else. And I know exactly which man he hides behind. His eyes hardened, blue steel reflecting war. Gunny Henderson. Then he stepped out into the blinding sun, the weight of the badge behind him and the weight of an oath driving him forward. Night crept over Kingsport like spilled ink, thick, dark, and silent in all the wrong places. Elijah changed out of his dress blues and into the uniform of a different kind of operation. Dark jeans, a gray hoodie, boots with silent soles. He wasn't the officer appealing to the law now. He was the operator working in shadows the law couldn't reach. The truck crept through back alleys until it stopped behind a dimly lit dive bar, the rusty anchor, its neon sign flickering like a failing pulse. This was where off-duty cops, construction workers, and private security men washed down their sins with whiskey. This was where Frank Gunny Henderson would be, a Marine Corps legend turned head of security for Vanderbilt Enterprises, a man with a scar down his face and a code of honor buried under too many compromises. Elijah watched the back door. He waited. Operators knew patience wasn't the absence of action. It was the readiness to unleash it. Finally, the steel door swung open with a groaning hinge. Gunny stepped out, broad frame, thick neck, jacket stretched over a body that looked carved from wreckage and war. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly revealing a face hardened by pain, duty, and regret. That was Elijah's moment. He stepped out of the shadows, hands visible, posture neutral. Evening, Gunny, Elijah said. Henderson didn't flinch, didn't reach for the concealed weapon Elijah knew he carried. He exhaled a stream of smoke. Commander Thorne, he rumbled, saw you on the radio waves today, kicking billionaires and stealing dogs. Hell of a hobby. Didn't steal the dog, Elijah said evenly. Saved him. And the girl. Gunny snorted. Vanderbilt has a different story. That's why I'm here. A long silence stretched between them, crackling like static. Then Elijah said it. Tell me, Gunny, when did the Marine Corps teach you to protect men who kick puppies and threaten women? The cigarette froze halfway to Gunny's lips. His jaw clenched. You're walking a fine line, Squid. Maybe, but I'm walking it straight. Elijah stepped closer, voice lowering. You saw the camera feeds that day. You ran the estate's security system. You know what really happened. Gunny looked away, a man avoiding a mirror. Server error, he muttered. Cloud corruption. That's what the official report says. Elijah shook his head. We both know EG security has redundancies, local caches, backups. Marines don't lie, Gunny, not even in civilian suits. Gunny's shoulders tensed. He flicked the cigarette to the ground. You don't get it, he growled. I've got a pension, an ex-wife in Florida, a kid in college. Vanderbilt owns this town. You cross him, you disappear. Maybe, Elijah said softly, but you'll disappear a lot faster if you can't look at yourself in the mirror. That hit the target. Gunny's breath trembled. Just once, barely visible, but Elijah saw it, saw the war inside him, saw the Marine buried under corporate chains. Then, Gunny's voice softened, raw, gravelly, heavy. You remind me of a kid I pulled out of Fallujah. Eyes like yours, would have hated the man I've become. He opened his hand. Sitting in his palm Small, black, innocent-looking, was an SD card. Elijah's jaw tightened. Gunny pressed it into his hand. "It's not just the dog," Gunny murmured. "Audio feeds run hot at the estate. High-gain mics." Vanderbilt didn't know they were recording during his meeting with the zoning commissioner. "What's on here?" Elijah asked. Gunny's voice dropped to a whisper. "Everything. Bribes, threats, extortion, the kick, the slap, your takedown, all of it, clear, unedited." Elijah stared at the card, feather light but heavy as justice. "This will end him." Gunny nodded. "Yeah, and it'll end me too. But at least my daughter won't grow up thinking her old man was a hired gun for a coward." He stepped back, squared his shoulders, and gave Elijah a sharp, respectful Marine salute. "Give him hell, Commander." Then Gunny walked into the night without waiting for thanks. Elijah stood there alone, rain beginning to fall, the SD card clutched in his fist. He had 38 hours left. He finally had a weapon, not a rifle, not a fist. The truth. And he knew exactly where he was taking it next. The Kingsport Town Hall had never been this full. People stood shoulder to shoulder, the old wooden rafters vibrating under the weight of whispers. Posters of the Vanderbilt Fairway and Resort shimmered on the projector screen. Glossy, sweeping images of golf greens, glassy clubhouses, and money dripping from every corner. Harrison Vanderbilt stood on stage in a tailored navy suit, pacing like a televangelist selling salvation. "Progress," he shouted, hands high. "Prosperity. Kingsport deserves to be great. All we need, just one small zoning signature, and our future begins tonight." A few claps rose from the front rows, but most of the room felt uneasy. The air was charged. Anticipation hung like humidity before a storm. Harrison saw the hesitation and laughed lightly into the microphone. "And ignore the rumors. Lies spread by people who want to keep you poor. Folks who fear the future." He glanced at the sheriff standing near the stage. "The sheriff is here tonight to maintain order, as he should be." He reached for the gavel as if closing the meeting was already his right. A hush swept the room. Harrison raised the gavel. But he never struck, because the double doors at the back of the hall slammed open so loudly the hinges rattled. The sound sliced through the auditorium like a detonation. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway, framed by the darkness outside and the warm hall lights behind him, was Lieutenant Commander Elijah Thorne, in full-dress blue uniform, chest of ribbons gleaming, jaw set with purpose, eyes burning with truth. But he was not alone. To his left, Colonel James Miller, spine straight as a rifle barrel. To his right, Dr. Sam, leaning on a cane, eyes sharp as broken glass. And between them, holding a leash with quiet pride, Mia, her bruise fading like a ghost of the girl she used to be. On the leash walked Scout, no longer a frightened puppy, no longer broken. Bandaged ribs and all, he walked with the bearing of a young guardian, ears forward, tail steady, chest lifted with courage. The room froze. Harrison sputtered at the microphone. "What is this? This is a private meeting. Sheriff, remove them." But Sheriff Brody stepped forward, not toward Elijah, toward the stage. "This is a public hall," Brody said loudly, "open to all citizens. Commander Thorne has the floor." The crowd murmured, stirred, straightened. Elijah walked down the center aisle. The room parted for him like water around a ship. Every step echoed, a slow, inevitable drumbeat of justice. At the foot of the stage, Elijah turned to face the town. "You talk about progress," he began, not shouting, but projecting with the authority of a man used to commanding soldiers under fire. "You talk about the future, but you build your empire on lies." He pulled something small from his pocket, the SD card, a tiny piece of plastic that looked impossibly light in his hand, but it carried the weight of everything. "This," Elijah said, holding it up, "is the truth you deserve." Harrison's face lost color. "Cut the power. Do not play." The technician, an 18-year-old from town whose grandfather once served under Colonel Miller, ignored him and plugged the card in. The projector flickered, then lit up with the party footage. The fall, the spilled wine, the slap, Mia crying on the stone patio. Gasps rippled across the crowd like a shock wave. Then came the moment. Harrison drew his leg back. kicked the puppy, sent Scout flying into the rose bushes. A woman in the third row covered her mouth. A man muttered, "Oh my God." A child whispered, "Mama, why would someone do that?" But the worst was still coming, because the screen shifted to a new audio file. Crystal clear, high gain, undeniable. Harrison's voice. "I don't care about the zoning laws. Approve the water diversion or your wife hears about that apartment in the city. And if that old woman at Hope's End doesn't sell, I'll bury her in legal fees until she starves." Silence fell so heavy the walls seemed to absorb it. For 3 long seconds, and the entire town inhaled. Then Mrs. Gable, the elderly librarian, stood up and quietly turned her back to Harrison. One by one, people followed. Farmers, teachers, mechanics, mothers, veterans, teenagers. A wave of backs, solid, silent, unmovable, rose against the billionaire. Harrison choked on his own breath. "Sheriff! Sheriff! Arrest him! He's impersonating—" But Sheriff Brody mounted the steps, hand already on his cuffs. "Harrison Vanderbilt," Brody announced, voice steady, amplified by the acoustics, "you are under arrest for animal cruelty, bribery, extortion, and filing a false report." Brody grabbed Harrison's wrist. Harrison screamed, "You can't! I am this town!" Brody twisted his arm just enough to silence him. "No," the sheriff said. "This town just turned its back on you." He cuffed him, metal clicking like a verdict carved into stone. As Brody hauled the billionaire down from the stage, everyone watched. But the final judgment didn't come from the sheriff. It came from Scout. The young German shepherd walked forward, leash slack in Mia's hands. He sniffed the leg that had kicked him, paused, tilted his head, looked up at the man trembling in fear. Then he simply turned away, dismissed him, as if saying, "You are not worth my anger." Colonel Miller murmured from behind Elijah, "Even the dog pities you." The crowd erupted in applause, slow, steady, rising into a roar that shook the old rafters overhead. It wasn't applause for Elijah, or for Mia, or even for Scout. It was applause for the return of something Kingsport thought it had lost. Justice, dignity, courage, and the truth, finally free. Elijah looked at Mia, Scout leaning against her leg, tail gently wagging. He checked his watch. 12 hours left before deployment. He had won the battle. Now he had to go fight the war. The morning after the town hall victory rose beautifully, cruelly beautifully. Golden sunlight spilled over Hope's End, touching the wet grass, the steaming barns, the old oak trees standing guard at the property line. But inside the farmhouse, the air was heavy. Elijah's truck idled in the driveway, releasing slow streams of white exhaust into the crisp morning cold. His duffel bag sat in the passenger seat, packed with the precision of a soldier who'd spent half his life ready to leave at a moment's notice. Sarah stood on the porch, coffee mug in her hands, watching her son with eyes that carried the weight of every deployment she had survived. She hugged him tight. "You come home," she whispered into his ear. "You come home whole." He nodded but didn't promise. Real soldiers never made promises they might not keep. Then he walked to Mia. She stood by the hood of the truck, Scout sitting obediently at her heel. The young German shepherd still had a compression wrap around his ribs, but he looked stronger, steadier, like he understood that the man leaving was his pack leader. Mia didn't know what to say, so Elijah spoke first. He reached under his shirt and pulled out the dog tags that rested against his heart, metal warm from his skin, edges worn from years of sweat, sand, and survival. He placed them in Mia's hand, curling her fingers around them. "These tell the world who I am if I can't speak for myself," he said, voice low, gravelly. "My blood type, my faith, my name." Her breath trembled. "Elijah." "They mean I have to come back," he continued, "because they belong here, with you, with him, with this place." He nodded to Scout. The pup leaned forward, licking Elijah's hand once, a solemn seal. "You're in charge now," Elijah said softly, "of this land, of the accounts, of the home." Mia closed her eyes, holding the dog tags against her chest. "I'll keep the fire burning," she whispered, and the gate opened. Elijah knelt in front of Scout. The dog straightened, chest rising, tail stiffening, a young warrior receiving orders. Eyes up, Elijah told him. Ears open. Watch over them. Scout nudged his nose against Elijah's palm in understanding. Then, without looking back, Elijah climbed into the truck and drove down the gravel lane. Mia and Sarah stood hand in hand as the dust settled and the engine faded into the wind. Hope's End had held the line. Now it had to hold the silence. Autumn came first, painting the valley in shades of rust and copper. Mia kept the farm alive with Sarah's guidance, feeding chickens, repairing fences, tending the creek Elijah had fought so hard to protect. Scout became her shadow. At night, he lay at the end of the driveway, staring down the road until sleep finally pulled him under. Then winter arrived, a brutal one. Snow blanketed the valley in white, erasing footprints, muting sounds, and the letters from Elijah slowed, then stopped. Mia wore his dog tags every day, metal warmed by her heartbeat, not his. Sarah tried to keep her spirits up with chores, stories, and extra biscuits left on Mia's plate by accident. But even she, the unbreakable matriarch, sometimes paused at the window and whispered prayers into the cold air. Scout felt it too. He paced at night, restless. He whined softly when the wind howled like distant artillery. On Christmas Eve, the farmhouse glowed with pine branches, candlelight, and roasted turkey. But there was an empty chair at the table, an overturned plate, and a single burning candle. A place for Elijah. As tradition, as hope, as memory. Mia sat by the window, tears slipping silently down her face. Sarah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He'll come home, she whispered. Scout suddenly stood, ears erect. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Not a warning, a recognition. Mama, what is it? Mia whispered, heart pounding. Scout bolted to the front door, let out a sharp, urgent bark. Sarah froze. Someone's coming, she breathed. Headlights cut through the swirling snow, slow, heavy beams crawling up the long driveway. Not a civilian car, a military Humvee. Mia's heart shattered, then stitched itself together all in one painful second. No, no, please, not a folded flag. Please. The vehicle stopped. The driver stepped out, walked to the passenger side, opened the door. A figure emerged, slowly, heavily, leaning on a black metal cane. His uniform was dusted with snow. His beard was thicker, his face thinner. A new scar sliced through his eyebrow, but the eyes, those fierce, steady blue eyes, were unmistakable. Scout didn't jump. He approached slowly, reverently, pressing his weight against Elijah's good leg. The soldier dropped to his knees in the snow and buried both hands in the dog's fur. I'm home, buddy, he whispered, voice cracking. I'm home. Mia ran to him, collapsing into his arms. He held her as though anchoring himself to the earth. Sarah joined them, completing the circle. A soldier, a maiden, a mother, and a shepherd, held together against the cold. Elijah lifted the dog tags from around Mia's neck. I told you I'd come back for these, he whispered, voice trembling. Snow fell softly around them, covering scars, healing wounds, turning the night into a quiet miracle. Inside, the fire glowed warm. Outside, the war was over. In Hope's End, faithful as ever, welcomed its guardian home. If this story touched your heart, take a moment and breathe. Because somewhere in this world, a dog just like Scout is standing guard beside someone who feels small, forgotten, or afraid. And somewhere, a soldier just like Elijah is carrying a weight no one sees, but still choosing courage over comfort, loyalty over silence. Their paths cross in quiet places, in barns lit by truck headlights, in snowy driveways, in the hearts of people who refuse to give up on each other. And stories like theirs remind us of something simple yet powerful. True heroes don't always wear uniforms. Some walk on four paws, some hold the line even when no one is watching, and some bring us home when the world goes dark. If you believe that courage can come from unlikely places, from a soldier, from a scared young girl, or from a puppy born to protect, then don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more stories on paw prints of valor. Because every paw print, every heartbeat, every act of loyalty tells a story worth remembering.